The soft morning light filtered through the curtains of a modest cottage at the edge of town. The air carried the crispness of early autumn, with leaves just beginning to fall, blanketing the narrow path leading to the house. Inside, Mary, a retired school librarian in her late 70s, prepared her usual morning tea. Her movements were careful but practiced, reflecting years of routine and quiet independence. At her feet was Max, her loyal dog of many years. Max had been with Mary since her husband's passing, providing her with comfort and companionship. He was an impressive presence, alert, steady, and exuding a quiet strength. Though Max was no longer young, there was an undeniable energy in his stance and an intelligence in his eyes that hinted at his past. What most neighbors didn't know, and what Mary rarely mentioned, was that Max had once been a highly trained police dog. Now retired, he was simply her devoted companion, though his instincts had never dulled. The pair shared a serene routine. Each morning, they would walk through the quiet streets of their small town, stopping by the park before visiting the local market. It was a comforting ritual, one that Mary cherished deeply. She loved greeting familiar faces, sharing smiles and kind words with her neighbors. Max, ever attentive, would walk by her side, his steady gaze taking in every detail around them. On this particular day, however, something felt different. As they stepped onto the path, a light breeze rustled the leaves, and Max's ears twitched. His usual calm seemed to shift into a state of alertness. Mary noticed his change in demeanor and smiled softly. "What is it, boy?" "Just the wind, perhaps," she murmured, giving his fur a gentle pat. They continued their walk, the rhythm of their footsteps blending with the faint sounds of morning life. Birds chirping, a distant lawnmower, and the soft murmur of conversations. Max stayed close to Mary, his body tense but controlled. Though she trusted his instincts implicitly, Mary chose to dismiss her own unease, chalking it up to the season's change and the unfamiliar chill in the air. When they reached the market, Mary greeted the vendors with her usual warmth, picking up fresh bread and a handful of vegetables. Max sat patiently at her side, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. A young vendor leaned over the counter to scratch behind Max's ears. "He's a good dog, isn't he?" the boy said, smiling. Mary chuckled. "The best. Max has always looked out for me." As they headed back toward the cottage, the street seemed quieter than usual, almost unnervingly so. Max's behavior mirrored this stillness. His head remained high, his ears twitching at the faintest sound. When they approached a narrow alley that cut through the town's center, Max hesitated, stopping abruptly in his tracks. "What's wrong, Max?" Mary asked, puzzled. The dog let out a low growl, his posture stiff as he positioned himself slightly ahead of her, blocking her path. Mary peered into the alley. It looked empty, save for a few scattered leaves. She hesitated, her hand tightening slightly on the leash. "It's just a shortcut, Max. We've taken it 100 times before," she said, her voice soothing. But the dog wouldn't budge. His focus was unwavering, his body coiled like a spring. Though she trusted Max deeply, Mary sighed and decided to take the longer route home. As they walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Max stayed close, his presence a constant reassurance, yet his tension was infectious. Back at the cottage, Mary set the kettle on the stove and prepared for her afternoon tea. Max lay by her feet, his alertness finally easing as the familiar sounds of home surrounded them. But the quiet didn't last long. A soft knock came at the door, startling Mary. She wasn't expecting visitors. Max was on his feet instantly, his ears perked, his gaze fixed on the door. "It's probably just the mailman," Mary said, trying to calm her own nerves as she approached the door. But Max's low growl stopped her in her tracks. The knock came again, this time louder, more insistent. Mary hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She glanced at Max, whose posture was rigid, his gaze unrelenting. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the flutter of unease in her chest. No answer. Just the sound of another knock, harder this time. Mary's heart raced as she looked at Max, her trusted protector. "It's okay, Max," she whispered, though her words felt more like an attempt to reassure herself. Max, however, seemed to sense otherwise. As the silence stretched on, a sense of dread began to creep into the room. The morning's tranquility had been replaced with an uneasy tension that lingered in the air. Mary knew one thing for certain. Whatever was on the other side of that door, Max was ready. The persistent knocking at the door sent a ripple of unease through Mary's usually peaceful home. She stood frozen for a moment, her hand hovering over the doorknob as Max's low growl grew more insistent. His stance was unwavering, his sharp eyes fixed on the door as though he could see through it. "Max," Mary whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It's probably nothing, just someone selling something, maybe." But even as she said it, she knew better. Something about the situation didn't feel right, and Max's instincts were rarely wrong. She glanced at the window, the lace curtain obscuring her view of whoever was outside. Her heart pounded as she moved cautiously toward the door. Before she could reach it, the knocking stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its place. Mary's breath caught as she turned to look at Max. His ears remained perked, his body tense and ready to spring into action. She approached the window instead, carefully pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. Her heart sank when she saw two unfamiliar men standing on the porch, their expressions hidden beneath the shadows of their hooded jackets. They didn't look like salesmen, and they certainly weren't neighbors. Mary stepped back from the window, her mind racing. Who were they? And what did they want? She didn't have time to dwell on the questions before Max's growl turned into a sharp bark that echoed through the house. The sound startled her, but it also gave her a sense of reassurance. Max was there, and he wasn't afraid. The men outside exchanged a glance before one of them reached for the doorknob. Mary's heart skipped a beat as she heard it rattle. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. No answer. The doorknob jiggled again, harder this time, as though they were testing the lock. Max barked again, louder and more forceful, his stance shifting as he positioned himself between Mary and the door. His presence was a wall of protection, and for the first time that morning, Mary felt a glimmer of courage. "I'm calling the police," she shouted, her voice firm. She grabbed her phone from the counter, her fingers shaking as she dialed. But as she pressed the numbers, she realized the screen was dark. No signal. The storm the night before must have knocked out the cell tower, leaving her isolated. Panic threatened to take over, but Mary took a deep breath. She wasn't alone. She had Max. The men outside weren't deterred by her threat. Instead, one of them stepped off the porch, moving to the side of the house as the other remained near the door. Mary's mind raced. Were they looking for another way in? The back door? A window? She needed to act quickly. Moving with quiet urgency, she grabbed the heavy wooden chair from the dining table and wedged it beneath the doorknob. It wasn't much, but it would buy her time. Max stayed close, his bark echoing through the house in warning to anyone who dared come inside. The sound of glass shattering broke the tense silence. Mary spun around, her heart leaping as she realized it had come from the back of the house. Max bolted toward the sound, his movements swift and precise despite his age. "Max, wait," Mary called, fear gripping her as she followed him. When she reached the back door, she saw one of the men climbing through the broken window, his face partially obscured by his hood. But before he could get inside, Max was on him. The dog lunged with a force that defied his years, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's arm. The intruder cried out. His attempt to pull away only met with Max's relentless grip. "Max, stop!" Mary shouted instinctively, though she knew her dog was acting to protect her. The man stumbled back, falling to the ground outside as Max released him with a warning growl. The other man appeared from around the corner, his expression shifting from smug confidence to shock as he saw his partner retreating. "Let's go," the first man shouted, cradling his injured arm as he scrambled to his feet. The second man hesitated, his gaze flicking to Max, whose stance was still defensive, his sharp teeth bared. It was clear he wasn't backing down. The two men retreated, their hurried footsteps fading into the distance. Mary stood frozen, her breath coming in short gasps as she watched them disappear. Max remained by the broken window, his body still tense, his eyes trained on the empty yard as though daring them to return. When the danger had passed, Mary sank to the floor, her hands trembling as she reached for Max. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice breaking as tears filled her eyes. "You saved me." Max licked her hand gently, his posture relaxing slightly as he returned to her side. Despite the fear that still lingered, Mary felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Max had been more than her companion. He had been her protector, her hero. As she sat there, holding him close, Mary realized just how much she owed to her loyal friend. Max wasn't just a dog, he was her guardian. And in that moment she knew she would never feel alone as long as he was by her side. The house fell into a tense quiet after the intruders fled. Mary sat on the floor, her arms wrapped tightly around Max as she tried to steady her trembling hands. The broken glass scattered across the kitchen floor glinted in the afternoon light, a stark reminder of how close she had come to danger. Max's breathing was steady, his body pressed against Mary as though anchoring her in the moment. His sharp eyes remained fixed on the window, his ears twitching at every faint sound. Though the immediate threat was gone, his instincts were still on high alert. "Good boy," Mary whispered again, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. She ran her fingers through Max's fur, her tears spilling over as she realized the depth of what had just happened. "You saved me, Max. I don't know what I'd do without you." The sound of footsteps outside made Mary's heart leap, but this time they were slow and deliberate, accompanied by the familiar crunch of gravel on the path. She strained to listen, her pulse quickening until a familiar voice called out, "Mary, are you home?" "It's Officer Blake." Relief washed over her as she scrambled to her feet, still gripping Max's collar. She moved cautiously toward the front door, her voice shaky as she called back, "Yes, I'm here, come in." The door creaked open, and Officer Blake, the town's kind-hearted policeman, stepped inside. His sharp gaze immediately took in the scene, the broken glass, the upturned chair, and the unmistakable tension in Mary's face. "What happened?" he asked, his tone calm but urgent. Mary gestured toward the kitchen, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Two men, they tried to get inside. They knocked on the front door, but when I didn't answer, they went around back and broke the window." Officer Blake's expression darkened as he stepped closer, his hand instinctively resting on the radio clipped to his shoulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her for any signs of injury. "No," Mary replied quickly. Max stopped them. He chased them off before they could get inside." Blake's eyes shifted to the dog sitting protectively at Mary's side. His expression softened, a small smile breaking through his otherwise stern demeanor. "Well, it seems like Max still has some of that police dog in him," he said, crouching to pet the dog. "Good job, buddy." Max wagged his tail slightly, his body relaxing under Blake's familiar touch. Mary watched the exchange, a wave of pride swelling in her chest. "He's always been loyal," she said softly. "But today he was a hero." Blake nodded, rising to his feet. "You're lucky to have him," he said, "and it's clear he hasn't lost his edge. Not many people would have had the presence of mind to act the way Max did." He turned his attention back to the broken window, his professional demeanor returning. "I'll need to file a report. Can you describe the men? Did you see anything unusual before they came to the house?" Mary recounted the morning's events as best she could, her voice steadying as she spoke. Blake took detailed notes, his brow furrowing as she described the intruders and their suspicious behavior. "Sounds like they were looking for an easy target," he said grimly. "But they didn't count on Max." He finished his report and clipped the notepad back to his belt. "We'll increase patrols in the area," he assured her, "and I'll alert the other officers to keep an eye out for anyone matching their description. In the meantime, if you need anything, don't hesitate to call." Mary nodded, her gratitude evident in her tearful smile. "Thank you, Officer Blake. I don't know what I'd have done if Max hadn't been here." Blake placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got a good protector, Mary, and if those men have any sense, they won't be coming back." As Blake left to continue his patrol, Mary knelt beside Max, wrapping her arms around him in a tight hug. "You're more than just a good dog," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're my guardian angel." Max leaned into her embrace, his steady presence offering her a comfort that words couldn't capture. In that moment, Mary realized just how much Max meant to her, not just as a companion but as a true partner who would do whatever it took to keep her safe. The rest of the afternoon was spent cleaning up the mess, but Mary couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease. Though the danger had passed, the memory of the intruders and their intentions weighed heavily on her mind. Still, every glance at Max reminded her that she wasn't alone. His unwavering loyalty was a source of strength, a reminder that she had someone she could always count on. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the cottage, Mary sat on the porch with Max by her side. The quiet hum of the evening felt almost surreal after the chaos of the day, but Mary found solace in the rhythmic rise and fall of Max's breathing. He was her protector, her hero, and her steadfast companion, and as long as he was by her side, she knew she would be okay. The evening deepened, and the stars began to appear, casting a soft glow over the quiet town. Mary sat on her porch swing, the rhythmic creak of its chains blending with the gentle rustling of leaves. Max lay at her feet, his body relaxed yet alert, his ears twitching at the faintest sound. The day's events still lingered in Mary's mind, but the warmth of Max's presence helped to ease her nerves. She reached down to stroke his fur, her touch soft and reassuring. "You've always been my rock, Max," she said quietly, "even when I didn't realize how much I needed you." Max lifted his head, his golden eyes meeting hers with an expression of quiet understanding. Mary couldn't help but smile, the bond they shared deepening in that moment. It wasn't just loyalty that defined their relationship, it was trust, built over years of companionship and unwavering support. As the stillness settled, Mary's thoughts drifted to Max's past. She remembered the day her late husband, George, had brought Max home. At the time, Max was newly retired from the police force, his reputation as a skilled and fearless K-9 preceding him. George had been adamant about giving Max a peaceful life after his years of service, and Mary had quickly come to love the gentle giant. Though Max had traded his badge for a quieter life, his instincts had never left him. Mary had often marveled at his sharp senses, the way he seemed to know when something wasn't right. Today had been no different. If anything, it was a reminder of the hero he had always been. The sound of a car approaching pulled Mary from her thoughts. Her heart skipped a beat as she glanced toward the driveway, but her tension eased when she recognized Officer Blake's patrol car. The headlights cut through the dark, and the engine hummed softly as he parked and stepped out. "Evening, Mary," he greeted, his tone warm but professional. "I wanted to check in and let you know we've identified the men who came to your house." Mary's breath caught. "You did? What did you find out?" Blake nodded, his expression serious. "We caught them trying to break into another home on the outskirts of town. They're part of a group known for targeting elderly residents, assuming they're vulnerable. But thanks to Max, they didn't get far this time." Mary felt a mix of relief and anger. The thought of being seen as an easy target was unsettling, but knowing Max had thwarted their plans filled her with pride. "I don't know what I would have done without him," she said softly. "He's more than just a dog. He's my protector." Blake smiled, glancing down at Max, who was watching him intently. "He's one of the best, that's for sure, and it's clear he hasn't forgotten his training." He handed Mary a pamphlet. "We're organizing a neighborhood safety meeting next week. It might be a good idea to attend, just to go over some tips and resources. But with Max here, I'd say you've already got the best security system around." Mary chuckled, her hand resting on Max's head. "Thank you, Officer Blake. I'll definitely be there." As Blake drove away, the quiet returned, leaving Mary and Max alone once more. She leaned back on the swing, her gaze shifting to the stars overhead. "I never thought I'd need you to protect me like that," she murmured, her voice filled with gratitude. "But you were there, just like you've always been." Max let out a soft huff, his tail thumping gently against the porch. It was as if he understood her words, his quiet presence speaking volumes. Mary felt a wave of emotion swell in her chest as she looked at him, her mind replaying the moments of the day. He had acted without hesitation, putting himself between her and danger, just as he had done during his years as a police dog. The bond they shared went beyond companionship. It was a partnership built on trust, love, and an unspoken understanding. Mary knew that Max's courage and loyalty were gifts, ones she would never take for granted. As the night deepened, Mary rose from the swing, her movement slow but steady. "Come on, Max," she said, her voice soft. "Let's go inside." Max followed her into the house, his steps light but purposeful. He settled by the door, his usual spot, where he could keep watch over the home and the person he loved most. Mary smiled as she watched him, her heart full of gratitude and pride. Before turning in for the night, she knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck in a gentle hug. "You're my hero, Max," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "You always have been." Max rested his head against her shoulder, his quiet strength enveloping her like a shield. In that moment, Mary knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would never be alone. Max would always be there, her steadfast guardian and her greatest blessing. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Mary prepared breakfast. The warmth of the new day did little to erase the vivid memory of the previous afternoon, but she felt stronger somehow, more aware of the protection and love that surrounded her. Max sat near her feet, his tail swishing lazily against the floor as he watched her with calm, steady eyes. "Good morning, Max," Mary said with a soft smile, setting down his bowl of food. "You earned a feast after yesterday." Max approached the bowl, his movements measured and composed, as though even the simple act of eating was part of his duty. Mary chuckled, her heart swelling with affection. His presence brought her an overwhelming sense of security, one she hadn't fully appreciated until now. After breakfast, Mary decided to take Max for their usual walk. The fresh air and familiar path through the town felt different today, as though the world had shifted slightly, its colors brighter and its sounds sharper. The neighbors she passed stopped to greet her, their words filled with warmth and admiration for her brave companion. "I heard what happened, Mary," said Mrs. Green, her voice tinged with awe. "That Max of yours is a hero." Mary smiled, resting a hand on Max's head. "He's always been a hero to me, but now the whole town knows." As they continued through the park, Mary couldn't help but reflect on how Max had been there for her every step of the way. Not just in moments of danger, but in the quiet, unspoken ways that made her life fuller. He had been her guardian, her confidant, and her partner in navigating the challenges of life alone. When they returned home, Mary sat on the porch swing once more, watching as Max lay down at her feet. The soft breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it a sense of peace that felt well earned. She reached down to stroke Max's fur, her touch lingering as she spoke. "You've done so much for me, Max," she said quietly. "You've given me courage when I didn't have it and strength when I felt weak. I don't know how I got so lucky to have you, but I'll never stop being grateful." Max's ears twitched at her words, his gaze lifting to meet hers. In his golden eyes, Mary saw everything she needed: devotion, loyalty, and a love that didn't require words to be understood. It was a bond that went beyond the simple roles of pet and owner. It was a partnership, a shared life built on trust and care. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast the cottage in a warm, golden glow, Mary prepared for bed. She paused by the door, watching as Max settled into his usual spot near the entrance, his body poised and ready to protect her once again. "Good night, Max," she said softly, her voice filled with love. "Sleep well, my hero." Max responded with a low, contented huff, his head resting on his paws as his eyes closed. Though the house grew silent, Mary knew that Max's watchful presence would never waver. He had proven time and again that he was more than a dog. He was her guardian angel, her unwavering protector. And as she drifted off to sleep, her heart full of gratitude, Mary felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that with Max by her side, she was never truly alone. If this story of loyalty, courage, and an unbreakable bond touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's celebrate the extraordinary ways animals enrich and protect our lives.